Welcome back to the Health Tech Edge. Our guest today is James Wallace, advisor, board member, senior researcher at Harvard Business School, and author of Precision Medicine, AI and the Science of Personalized Healthcare. Jim has worked across payers, providers, private equity, and even SpaceX. He spent his career at the intersection of healthcare, business, and technology. Today, we're going to talk about how AI can help healthcare leaders cut costs, improve productivity, and get results now. Jim, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here. I'm a fan of your podcasts, and boy, aren't we in a state of flux in our industry now.
Yeah, I know. And that's I think even, looking at your book, right? It's like you write a book about AI and you just really hope that it's going to last. I'm sure there's some lasting principles in there, but we'll get into a little bit of it, right? Because it is such an ever-changing world. So let's use that as kind of a way to get into our first topic. So, AI in healthcare specifically, I think there's a lot of the industry that looks at AI in general and thinks that there's a huge transformative opportunity there. What's your take on what it represents as an opportunity specifically for healthcare, either payer, provider, both, kind of cross industry? What do you think?
Yes, it's interesting. If you look at the healthcare value chain, there's really probably three segments of general opportunity. And as background, my doctoral work was at the payer provider. I'm sorry, the patient provider interface. I come from the payer provider world, and that's probably the general bifurcation. Is there's going to be things you can do kind of on the front end of getting someone into a healthcare system, and that's payer management. At the other end, there's things you could do in care delivery to actually change outcomes. But in the middle, it's the payer provider interface. There are things that you could do, that Epic or Oracle are doing, and other infrastructure providers to help streamline that. So I think each one of those is developing on a different path with regard to AI. Some are low-hanging fruit, some are deep synthesis, and we can get into those as you'd like. So those are the three areas: kind of payer-oriented, payer-provider interface or provider, and then kind of in care delivery.
Yeah, and I've seen some make predictions. I think it was one of the executives from CVS Aetna. He was making prediction about what this represents in terms of kind of the generational leap opportunity, kind of
Oh,
similar to, it's kind of the telecom example, is I think the one that he used, looking at what happened in markets like India, where you can kind of skip over copper wire and go right to wireless, right? Because
yep.
the rollout of copper wire and kind of pulling that was so difficult and so time consuming and expensive, right? And then you can kind of make the leap. What's your take on that? Do you feel like this is one of those inflection points in kind of technology and healthcare where we can skip some generations of learning and rollouts and kind of make big advances? Or do you think it's still going to be measured because there's just so much risk already built into healthcare as an industry?
Yeah, I think two reactions to that. Definitely generational kind of leapfrog opportunity if it's embraced the right way. But healthcare is so highly regulated, and it's so oligopolistic that I think incremental change is likely to slow that. But I'm reminded of my experience at SpaceX, completely different industry, but simply by creating multi-payload launch vehicles with a reusable booster, we made the entire low Earth orbit accessible as space real estate. It created a secondary market in information exchange there that really, now there are some, I can't even remember now, 16 to 18,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. So it changed everything. AI has the potential to leapfrog all the trial and error, one size fits all methods of performing medicine that we've done to date by going directly to your genome and saying, this is going to work for you, this other stuff won't. So I definitely see some leapfrog opportunities for those firms and segments of care delivery and payer and provider services, that those folks that are willing to entertain that. Lots of opportunity for disruption.
Yeah, and I know that one of the areas that you've done some work in is kind of looking at the waste that's in the system of,
Yep.
kind of the U.S. healthcare system. So, um, if you're a healthcare exec and you're in a position to lead and utilize AI in this kind of time period, we're in kind of the tail end of 2025 here and thinking about 2026 planning. Are you going after waste? Are you looking for revenue upside? Where are you kind of looking for those opportunities, and what do you think is maybe some of that low hanging fruit opportunity?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's the $1 million fork in the road, because you can do both.
Mhm.
You can $528 million, $1 billion a year is attributable to just the wrong medications. Fully 16% of U.S. healthcare expenditures could be eliminated by just taking $120 pharmacogenomics test. And that's low hanging fruit that everybody could implement tomorrow. Similar to that would be revenue cycle management, appropriate coding, things in the front end of the system or the middle part of the system that really make care less wasteful and more appropriate. But where the real value, the leapfrog value, comes is from things that like Tempest AI is doing, which is replacing wholesale swaths of care. You can now eventually, I believe, all cancer is going to be related to some genetic difference that's triggered by an environmental effect. I think that's the way that the science is heading. Well, if you know today that you have that genetic mutation just awaiting the trigger, you can avoid chemotherapy and radiotherapy altogether by administering monoclonal antibodies as soon as that condition is triggered. Those are the leapfrog opportunities, and I think if you just focus on that with PGX, I already said 1/6 of every, one out of every $6 spent could be avoided just by administering that test. You can look across, 120 million Americans have some cardiovascular disease. 1 in 4 people contract cancer over the course of their lifetime. You could start kind of chunking those parts of the healthcare delivery system apart, introducing disruptive innovation like monoclonal antibodies, and changing the whole cost curve. I mean, I'm of the opinion that insurance will always have a place for unavoidable events, but when 80% of your cost of care is attributable to chronic and non-communicable lifestyle choices, you can use that information to avoid those things and head them off at the pass. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I can relate to it in a way that, unfortunately, this is something that I've experienced in my own family, where we have a family member who has, I don't even remember what the full name is, CML. It's a form of
Mm-hmm.
leukemia, but with this California gene mutation,
Yes.
as it's
Yep.
known, and therefore it puts them on a specific treatment path. Uh, and one of the things that we found during a recent hospitalization, and kind of by using ChatGPT as my companion along this care journey for this loved one, I was putting everything that was
Yep.
happening, both the test results as they were coming out, as well as the conversations with the clinicians and others kind of testing and these kind of things, and putting all that information into just one big thread, and then asking, what are the questions we should be asking, what advice, these kind of things. Turns out that the drug for CML was causing pleural effusions, which then aggravated the congestive heart failure and the chronic kidney disease and all that. Right. So then you have to then say, okay, well, what are the things that we should be asking, again, kind of alternative treatments and these kind of things. And it led us on a path that I think it was still kind of a good hospital stay plus a rehab visit for a couple weeks afterwards, but eventually got the family member home, and I think with a better outcome and hopefully a better path
Yes.
forward had we not been guided. So I think kind of like, and that's like me doing a little bit of information and know-how. I think, the things that you're advocating and the research that you've done is more, how do we build the systemic functions of kind of the modern healthcare system so that it does this kind of automatically for people? Like, what
Yes.
if you don't, like, the thing I worried about with my family members, like, what about the people who don't have somebody who has the tech bias that I do to kind of plug all this information in? Kind of who guides them? What
Yes.
happens? How do they kind of slowly chug through the US healthcare system and deal with these kind of issues? And what does the future look like for them?
Yes, no, that's a great point too. I think there's going to be some evolution in what we today call primary care into what in the book I characterize as phorologists and acutologists. So right now, the primary care doctor is really a gatekeeper in a parametric value-based care system. They're designed to triage and keep people out of the system until they need it. A preventive healthcare system would actually have a phorologist who says, you have this specific lifestyle or genetic issue that's going to cause a problem, and I'm going to help you predict or forecast when. That's an early stage primary care function. But then there's the onset or the inception, the acutologist who says, okay, we missed the window of prediction. Now it's happening. Where do I guide you? That's kind of where primary care physicians are employed today. But layered in on top of that is the point you made, which is generative AI is really changing the boundary between what you and I know as patients and what the physician knows. Now, you get some physician pushback that says, I don't want somebody coming in here saying, you know, I have this dread disease that shares some of the symptoms that a lesser condition might have. They don't like that much. But that same integration capability of AI that the doctor uses to quickly prune what might be happening is now available to the patient. And the example in my life is my mother-in-law got her blood test results back well before her doctor visit. And she, just from the information accompanying the blood test result, blood chemistry results, was able to deduce, hey, I might have this issue. I'm going to ask the doctor about it. She gets into her primary care physician appointment. The doctor hadn't even looked at the results yet. And so she's bringing a solution that is informed for an 87-year-old woman to the appointment, like your situation. I think the other area, so that's going to change things at the interface of the patient and the provider. But the other thing that providers are doing at an integration level is, my favorite statistic is I was with one of the AI-enabled patient provider platform providers, and they identified from their own experience that 63% of their diabetic patients in their patient population had as a primary triggering event a behavioral condition. And that if you got control of the behavioral condition, the problems associated with eating and other nutrition and activity events would take care of themselves. And so it's insights like that that are just, blossoming out there that are now available as a preventive measure if the system pays for that. The problem that we have is that the system doesn't often pay for that $120 test that says do this, not that. So we have to get that's the incremental part, but I think patients are going to pull that through. I'm working with a pharmacogenomic test that is going to make those tests available at a far lower price point, simply because it's the right thing to do. And their other testing suite components will be pulled through once the patient knows, I can take this med, but not that. So I'm super excited about that, but we will have to overcome kind of the lethargy of the US-based reimbursement system.
Extensive kind of testing to forecast or look for the genetic mutations and these kind of elements, right, that just aren't available to the majority of people because of the financial barrier to entry. But that almost sounds like kind of what you're saying is the future for all of us potentially, right? If the costs can become more, and kind of the model flips, right, where we're not reacting to things, but we're thinking proactively about future health and what those indicators might be, and what the treatment might be, that and how that's personalized. Again, I know that's an area that you've done work in, that personalization you talked about, where we're looking at the genomes and looking like you could give every kind of common medicine available for whatever condition, but if you look at the person's genomics, like it's not going to work for them. They need something else.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's I don't want to crawl too far out in the limb or violate any non-disclosure arrangements, but I think in the near term, you're going to see the evolution of a completely open architecture, democratized health data platform that will actually pay the patient to do the right thing. So imagine that pharmacogenomic test that costs, let's say, $120 at the baseline. Um, Now being, instead of every 4 years, someone changes their employment status, changes their health plan, changes their provider in a way that causes a reestablished need for the same information. Imagine instead a world where the patient shows up at the doctor and the doctor says, I'll pay you $40 to let me have access to that test. It inverts the entire model that now people are being compensated to do the right thing. And I'm not even saying that's necessary. My experience would actually show once you tell somebody you have this circumstance, they're going to pull information out as you experienced, with your loved one, right? And so I think you're going to see that in the not too distant future, a complete democratization of data outside of that walled garden. What that means for the walled garden vendors like Epic and others remains to be seen. But I think you're going to see that literally within the next 6 months to 6 to 18 months.
Yeah, and I think that's what will be interesting too is that even I'm an Amazon Prime subscriber like
Yep.
millions of other people, and I got something. I don't have Amazon's medical program, whatever that's called. But I got a solicitation the other day where, they know enough about me from my shopping and whatever my profile is that I'm a man of a certain age. And they sent me a thing where it's like men's health specific kind of
Yes.
solicitation. And maybe it's the more embarrassing things that,
I was going to say
that
some of them embarrassing, some not. So
right. Well, something that maybe you don't want to go see your primary care doctor and they're offering you the ability to do a one-off visit and get your prescription all for one low fee. And so now
right.
it's like, people start like, okay, if I wanted GLP-1 drugs and my doctor prescribed it, my insurance wouldn't cover it. And then I went and got it from a compounding pharmacy, an online, right, which is the story for many people, right? Like you start kind of having all these little isolated, medical provider interactions. None of that data comes home to roost in your Epic My Chart, right? Only
Yep.
the stuff that's from a certain provider. I
Yep.
know one thing that Epic talked about at their user group meeting a couple of weeks ago, or not the user group meeting, I think it was their open conference, which happened more
Yes.
recently.
Yep.
They talked about the notion that, today everybody's My Chart is different. Your login is different for all of them. You can give kind of permissions and share and things like that. But now I think they're bringing it together under a unified login is, on the roadmap. So it starts to bring together that one universal record, which, if you go to one health system and you go to your local doctor and, they're all using My Chart, like maybe the information comes together a little bit more
You
holistically.
know what's
I
wrong
think
with
you're
that
still kind of
model?
all over the place though. Yeah.
Yeah, what's still self-limiting, and I don't suffer them their willingness and interest in sustaining their model, but I just had a physical. Um, my current provider is an Epic based provider. Um, I had a test done uh, 10 years ago with another health system. And even with a combined logon, my current doctor was not able to get access to that test, which had longevity durational value. The test value wasn't going to change. And so my doctor couldn't act on that. Um, Changing the login just changes what shell you have your hand over. It doesn't, right? And so I I applaud the distance. I kind of liken Epic to Bill Gates and Microsoft. They both started. Judy Faulkner and Bill Gates started their companies at the same time, approximately the same time, within a few years. But Bill saw fit to kind of bring in Steve Ballmer and others on the outside to kind of open up the ecosystem because they just couldn't serve 90% of the desktops that were running their software. Judy has not done that. And Judy only has 43% market share. She refuses outside money. She, builds everything on the inside, which guarantees a consumer experience, kind of like Steve Jobs and Apple. But at the end of the day, when technology changes, your walled garden wilts, and I think that's the problem Epic is going to face. They won't be able to continue to grow because they'll lose interoperability, and just making their systems talk within themselves does not save that problem. And I'd like to see Epic open up a lot more. I had insights from both the user group meeting and the Oracle Health and Life Sciences Summit earlier this month in Orlando. I'm sorry, last month. And the two worldviews could not be more different.
Mm.
I really look forward to that competition. And I'd love to hear your perspective on that, because I know you kind of have a foot in both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, we work with payers and providers. We work with those who use Epic and who use other platforms. But I think that the in the world that I come from, part of my career was, I did 11 years at Microsoft, so I'm very
Right.
used to kind of the open ecosystem, working collaboratively with ISV partners, with system integrators, really, customers as well, and their own teams, and having open standards. Microsoft can, certainly get its fair share of criticism, but I think one of the things they did is try to have that open ecosystem, and they have something like 400,000 partners globally because of that, right? Of the
Right.
ISV and the SI space. So I think it is kind of in some ways, uh, when Epic does a product roadmap update and they announce some new features or some innovation that's coming, there's a segment of the industry that looks at that and they're excited because they're Epic customers and they are looking forward to getting that. I don't think they always put a timeline to those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of like, so the other half of the industry or the other segment, whatever other percentage that would be, there are people who get frustrated because then, there's a certain amount of customers that get paralyzed uh,
Right.
because they're waiting for it because Epic's going to bring it, or, Cerner, or, like you can plug in whoever you want, right? It's always kind of a thing in technology. I always think about what is the cost to not doing something, right?
Yeah.
If it's even going to take them 3 to 5 years to build out that feature set, what could we do in the interim?
Right. Right. No, that's
And in the
that's a great point.
like, is there value in doing something in the interim, knowing that it may get a new solution, from Epic or something like that that drops in that's just in the product? Now, it may not be as mature a feature set, those kind of things, but those are the things that I don't envy customers in kind of making these kind of decisions.
Yeah, I think there are industry analogies there too. I was the head of strategy at Anthem, and I think we made some pretty good bets on where the industry was going there, enough to grow them to the second largest, insurer in the country. But if you look at Apple and Amazon, how far behind are they in the AI game right now? They're struggling. And it's because Apple has focused, in their instance, on the hardware element of their industry. And so today, Johnny Ive, who designed the iPhone, is now going to work for OpenAI to come up with a hands-free, eye-free, sensory-free device that ports directly into the AI. It will eliminate the iPhone. I mean, I don't want to rant, but I would short Apple stock right now simply because it's too complicated to operate an iPhone. I think if you look at Alexa, they're struggling too because the simple ability. I have to be careful using the wake word here because it'll wake up in our call. But the simple ability to interact with that early was environment changing, but they lost their way along along the way of what the content is. And so now I laugh whenever I ask Amazon for some information compared to what I can get by talking to OpenAI. Does that make sense? And so
Oh
I
yeah.
think that's what we face in healthcare too, is that there are going to be a lot of people with installed information technology that no longer works at the same level because it's trying to clap everything together with spit and baling wire.
Yeah.
That makes me sad, because if I were an Epic and I had access to 300 million patient records, I wouldn't be worrying about I wouldn't be worrying about much except making my desktop user interface a lot easier and convenient, and connecting the dots on all the data elements that are predictive, not episodic. And an Epic is an episodic solution, not a preventive or predictive solution. And that, I, whenever those circumstances present in any industry, you're going to see the installed base decay rapidly. I mean, we saw it at SpaceX. You're going to see that. You saw it in mobile phone technology, landline leapfrogging. You mentioned a couple of those. So it's going to be a really volatile world the next decade, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge for so many organizations in this space is trying to figure out where to put their investments. And I think that, the technical debt that you mentioned, right, the things that they've already got a lot of sunk money into and
Right.
feel like they need to, it's a hard decision for leaders. I think it's easier for new leaders, right? If you're a new leader come in, whether you're
Yes.
CEO, CIO, CTO, chief, data officer, something like that, you can easily come in and kind of write off the past and set a new direction. I think it's hard for existing leaders in healthcare maybe to kind of, admit maybe that. But I think, it's like, to me, it's always like playing poker. You're making decisions based on the information you have available at the time and
Yeah.
the odds and risks that you can predict. But there's
Yes.
a lot of this that's kind of unpredictable that's happened. So maybe we'll do for our last couple of minutes here some advice for healthcare leaders. I think that you talk about, kind of different categories as you opened with, and kind of those, maybe phrased another way. You had said to me one time, there's kind of like the fruit on the ground, the low hanging fruit, and then those deep synthesis things. So
Yeah.
if you're a healthcare leader, payer provider, you pick, kind of what, and you're looking at getting something going here in the end of 2025 and maybe making some bets about 2026. What are you working on, or what are you going to encourage people to think about as kind of those opportunities where, whether it's cost savings or, improved revenue or improved health outcomes, whatever those goals are, what are you making those investments in?
Yes, no, that's a great way to frame it too. I think the fruit on the ground is if you're not already implementing systems that deal with appropriate coding and revenue cycle management and entry to the system operating metrics, you're way behind. Now, you might shift to the side and become a direct primary care provider that just avoids all of that, and One Medical, concierge medical services kind of step outside of that and say we're going to do high touch. So that's kind of fruit on the ground. If you're not already doing that, you better have a different model because you're behind the game. On the low hanging fruit, I would say ambient scribe technology, um, uh, the application of AI to episodic care delivery workflows. So Tempest AI with oncological screening can eliminate chemotherapy for many cancers simply because it's attributable to a gene mutation. That's mid to low hanging fruit. But the deep synthesis is really turning all of that rich data into a predictive health record that says you're going to have diabetes, and it's going to be triggered because your genetic makeup makes you predisposed to depression. And so let's start treating the onset of isolation as you age and depression with the right medication and avoid the diabetes altogether. That's the deep synthesis. Combining that with democratization of healthcare data is going to just change it from the inside out. You're going to know more about what may happen to you before the doctor needs to treat it than we ever did. I'd like to think how Marcus Welby might, the doctor from the 70s, might look at today. AI allows the doctor to reconnect with the patient and practice that way. He was doing it intuitively. Now AI will give him the data to say, how are you doing today? We don't have to worry about this yet, but I want you to be mindful about it. It's going to restore empathy and trust in ways that we kind of got away from in value-based care. Does that make sense too?
Oh yeah, and I think that's the thing. Again, the observations, just kind of this most recent crisis with the family member that I referred to earlier, and you just look at what were the bright spots? What were the low points? And kind of what did we experience? Because family member, is brought into the emergency room, spent 3 days in the emergency room, first, 36 hours in a hallway bed, then into a room in the emergency department before getting onto a floor. A lot of different clinician interactions along
Yep.
the way, then at the rehab, and then the interactions there. So there's a lot of information to process. But I think, um, again, one of the things that you mentioned earlier in this conversation is, what is the interface to all of this information, right? Like, I'm about to go for my annual physical in about 2
Right.
years. I'm going to see the back of my primary care provider more than I'm going to see his front, because he's going to wheel up on the stool. And I've been seeing the same guy for almost 25 years, I think.
Uh-huh.
That's since I moved to this area. And he's going to say, okay, and right, and he's going to take a look at my chart, and he's going to go through a bunch of tabs, and he's going to see some tests, and he's going to wonder, why did we order those tests? Oh, I ordered those tests. Oh, why? And then, like, it's literally a conversation we had last year at the same visit.
Yes.
um, Instead of being able to look at kind of where I'm at and how I'm feeling and what I've been working on health wise and those kind of things. So it's not the experience that, it's probably not why he went into medicine, and he's probably been a doctor for almost 45, 50 years.
Right.
I want a patient, right? So, like, there is so much more and so much opportunity to work on the US healthcare system in whatever capacity. We're all hopeful and optimistic about the future, but there's certainly a lot of work to be done.
Yes. No, I agree. It's going to be a really vibrant next 5 to 10 years. I think we're, as kind of a capstone comment, I'd say we're just coming to terms with what Alvin Toffler described in the 70s as future shock, when your ability to receive information exceeds your ability to synthesize it.
Mm,
And that's where AI can really help. But we already are besieged with information every day in the news cycle. Um, Same thing in healthcare news. Now AI can help us figure out what's important. So I'm excited for the future.
yeah, same here. Well, I will recommend, if people are interested in reading some of your work, they can certainly go out to Amazon and find Precision Medicine, AI and the Science of Personalized Healthcare. You can go ahead and pick that up, and I think you'll enjoy that. And I'm sure if people want to connect with you, Jim, they can find you on LinkedIn, or is there anywhere else that you'd like them to come and find you if they want to have a conversation?
LinkedIn, James Wallace, Precision Medicine usually finds me, or precisionmedicinethebook.com is the website
Even better. There you go.
for all that information. So, and I encourage people with questions and ideas to reach out, because at the end of the day, we need to exchange all of those good, innovative thoughts, and to make it better for all of us. So,
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so much opportunity and so much good that can be done here. So we'll try to keep focused on the positive, and be hopeful about the future, as we said. So, well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today on the Health Tech Edge. Thank you, Jim, for being our guest and sharing your insights and your wisdom with all of us. We'll be back next time for another episode of the Health Tech Edge. If you liked today's episode, please like, comment, and share with a colleague. And with that, we'll go ahead and close things out. And thank you for spending time with us on the Health Tech Edge.